Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Mess. So today we're continuing a series on the MiSter FPGA DE10 Nano project, and I got a special video for you guys this Thursday because the Sega Saturn core has been updated by Srg320 as of May 10th, 2023. Probably didn't need to tell you the year there, I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about. But seeing a new core come in is absolutely spectacular. So we're going to be testing some games on the new core, and some of the tests from this video are still from the previous core. This is a mix and match, and I will give you an indication as when I'm looking at something new versus when it is from April. But we have a brand new core, and we need to put it through its paces, and I always love doing that, so let's go. But kicking it right off, Virtua Fighter Kids is now working, and I did have some help with this video because I've had a very busy 2 weeks here. Andy D from the MiSter Discord sent me over some captures, and he got Virtua Fighter Kids running. He is the best person on the MiSter Discords, named Andy D, no questions asked. This is a really weird pivot for Sega though. We had Virtua Fighter, we had Virtua Fighter 2 and a remix, but Virtua Fighter Kid basically takes all of the characters and designs them down to that super deformed chibi style, but keeps all of the Virtua Fighter gameplay. It is a very odd release, but it is a ton of fun, and you can see here it is working great on MiSter. Now you will see some interlacing lines, and that's because this game does run in the Saturn's high resolution mode, and it's going to be the same thing on something like some Virtua Fighter games or Fighting Vipers as well. So that is not unusual at all to see here, but everything is fast, it's fluid, it is exactly the Virtua Fighter Kids you would expect, and I do have this game in my collection, and it is a ton of fun. I don't know that I would start with it versus something like Virtua Fighter 2 or Remix, but it is a really interesting release for Sega, and it is great to see all of the Virtua Fighter characters redesigned with these giant bobblehead looking features. Some of the stages will definitely feel familiar, and obviously all the characters will, but this is going to be a ton of fun to play on MiSter in 2-player mode, because pretty much every fighting game is always going to be better if you bring friends. Now you may get this to run on your current build, you may not. It does seem very organic still as to what is working and what is not and for who, but I'm sure as the core gets further mature and we get new updates, it'll start working for more people. But moving on to another capture, and thanks to 30V for letting me use this from the MiSter Discords, one of the games that was mentioned in Srg320's patch notes for yesterday's core was improvements in certain chips, and one of the games mentioned was Shinobi X. Last time I tried this, it froze onto a black screen, but it is now loading and it has audio. So this is another new game that's currently working on the May core, and I can't wait to test some of the other games in the next video that didn't used to work to see if we can get them live, but Shinobi X 100% working right now. Moving on to another game that just seems to be working, and I'm going to mispronounce the hell out of this, is Kukoiku Tiger. This is an absolutely awesome shmup, and there was patch notes in Srg320's release from yesterday, and I will say that this seems to be running perfectly fine as well, and this is a game that previous to this core update was not working whatsoever on MiSter, and that's what I love so much about these new cores, is you get to go back into games that everyone knows don't run and try to see what might be working. And this game is fast paced, it's responsive, it's got some great sprite scaling, and it is another new game on the May core that you can just pick up and play today, and that is absolutely spectacular, and it's so much fun to see. It is a great shmup, and it's one of those staples of the Saturn library, and a lot of people have been asking whether or not this runs on the previous core, and I was never able to get it to test correctly. I had Andy D, a friend of mine, check it out, and it worked on his hardware as well, and he was nice enough to send this file along for me, because I was doing my real job yesterday, which is also editing videos, just not for YouTube. But you can see here that this is working really well. The sound is good, there's no graphical glitches whatsoever, it is loading between levels. This is what you would love to see, and it's amazing that Srg320 mentioned this in his patch notes. He kind of gives us breadcrumbs as to what game might be working next on his updates. So if you want to check this game out on the May core, just be aware that it is manual install only for the core, you got to copy it over. But this works great, and let's check out some more games that are just working. Now, one that everybody asks, and I can 100% understand why, is if Snatcher was running or not. And I can tell you that as far as I've gotten into the game, everything works perfectly fine. The audio is solid, if it's slightly cracky here and there, but the actual game itself is working perfectly fine, and Snatcher has so much personality and visual flair. I absolutely love looking at this game running on any platform whatsoever. And it is quite an expensive game if you want it in English, but don't forget there are some translation patches out there for certain consoles, and of course you have the Sega CD version as well. But everything as is expected to be here on the Saturn. Obviously I couldn't test the stunner light gun support because that is not in the core yet whatsoever, but you can use a light gun on Snatcher in certain spots, and it does make the game a little bit more fun doing it that way. But obviously this is a point and click adventure game visual novel, So you're either going to love that genre or not have anything to do with it whatsoever, but I can tell you it is running perfectly fine on MiSter. Now moving over to another game that everyone asked me to retest, it's going to be Albert Odyssey. Last time I showed this, it definitely had some audio issues and some freezing issues, but I am happy to say that now everything seems to be working perfectly fine again. And this is an absolutely gorgeous 2D role-playing game. This looks like if 3D was never invented and the only thing that was possible in the 32-bit era was better 2D graphics, Albert Odyssey has that look and vibe going for it. And it is such an amazing game. It's such a great adventure, and it's going to be great to play this on MiSter as well, because an original copy for the US Saturn is definitely not going to be the cheapest thing in the world. But this is just so great to see running, because like I said, last time I tried it, it just did not work very well. So with the new core updates, this has definitely improved a great deal. And I remember last time I tried it, the overworld map had a lot of glitches because of that kind of scaling background layer for the ground, but here it is working exactly as you would expect, as are the battles. Obviously, this being one of the first ones, it is not very hard at all to beat that werewolf monster or whatever it may be, but as you get further in the game, the battles become quite complex, and this is just an amazing role-playing game. If you've never played it before, you definitely owe it to yourself to check it out. And I love all the character designs as well. That snake there with all those tendrils coming off him. This game has personality and charm, and it also has an amazing intro with perfect audio, so go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds, and I'll come back and show you more games.
Ancient times, magic masters created the mystic kingdom of Argasta. It is said that there the Eldian brothers and a sister were born. Unfortunately, as they grew, the Black Dragon Vlog sensed the power of the Eldian clan and sought to destroy the Eldians and their enchanted kingdom. As the Black Dragon began its murderous assault, the three siblings combined their power, dealing the wicked beast a mortal wound that spewed vile blood upon them.
I think I heard one crackle in there, but it was very faint. But leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think about the audio in the current core, because to me, if that isn't 100% perfect, it's like 99% of the way there. Just remember, Albert Odyssey is a heartstring puller, and there are some sad parts of the game, but it is definitely worth checking out. I highly recommend you do so. Now onto a completely different genre and a completely different vibe is going to be Cho Aniki on the Sega Saturn. If you've never played a Cho Aniki game before, they are definitely a particular thing that people either seem to love or hate, and if you can't tell here from the intro yet, it is definitely a very weird game. But that weirdness is all of its charm, and there are a ton of entries in this franchise from the PC Engine to the PlayStation 1 and Sega Saturn, all the way up through the PlayStation 2. Leave me a comment down below and tell me if you've ever played a Cho Aniki game, because I would be curious. Now, if you want to play this on your Saturn, I'm going to tell you right now, turn your volume way down. The sound effects are clipping all of the channels, and if you put some headphones on, you're going to jump out of your seat and maybe crap your pants a little bit, because the audio volume is completely wrong, but that's fine. That's to be expected on a beta core. What I will say though is the gameplay is exactly as you would expect it to be, which is to say absolutely damn weird. This game just does whatever it wants to do, whenever it wants to do it, throws up some art styles and sprites that make absolutely no sense whatsoever, and you have to chase these balls around collecting protein to power up. All of those little pill-shaped things are protein balls. Do with that information as you will. But this game is a spectacle. It is so absolutely absurd. It is the type of game that you have to experience at least once for nothing else than to see this giant man, something or other, come out of a ship and attack you with his fists. This is all just a real game. If you've never heard of it before, you're probably wondering what the hell's going on. But it's actually a relatively competent horizontal shmup as well. It is not just weird for weird's sake, it is a decent B-tier game that just happens to raise above its punching weight, in my opinion, for the sheer weirdness of it all. Because as you see here, all of a sudden a bunch of men are going to be running in from the left hand side of the screen, and they're going to be making a human pyramid that's then going to attack you. I can't make this stuff up. This is not a fake game. It's real, and you can play it today on the current MiSter FPGA Sega Saturn core, and I highly recommend you do so because I assure you, you will never forget your experience of playing a Cho Aniki game. Because I can absolutely promise you the first time you play one, you're not going to know what's going on, but you're probably going to want to come back and experience it again because it is that good in the word department. And moving on to another game that never used to work on the previous core that does now is Super Puzzle Fighter 2. This is basically taking the characters from the Street Fighter and Darkstalkers franchise and turning them into a super deformed chibi look, which apparently is a theme for today's video. It's half Tetris, half Puyo Puyo with some Twinkle Star Sprites vibes there, but the way it works is you connect the colored gems and then you wait for one of the circular gems to show up in your next screen. You'll see here I have a blue one. If you touch that to any combination of those colored gems, they're going to knock off the screen, and if you do a good enough job, they're going to pop over to your opponent's screen. You need to wait it out until their screen fills up. There's a lot of strategy trying to combine the most amount of gems possible together before you blow them up. Because you'll see there I got a 3 chain, and that's going to drop all of that garbage on my opponent's screen. This game is very simple at face value, but gets very complex and difficult, and if you're playing with friends it gets even better, and you see that rainbow gem right there will knock absolutely anything off. But this is another game that never used to work on the previous core that does now, for me at least, and you 100% can load it up and play it from start to finish, or as far as you can get into the game, because I had absolutely no freezing issues whatsoever. It just doesn't have any audio, folks. Now moving on to something that doesn't work whatsoever except for the intro FMV is Time Commando. It freezes right here. This game, not good, but the FMV audio is perfect and it's the most 90s thing you've ever seen. So go ahead and watch for 45 seconds. I'll come back and show you some more games. So yeah, that audio sounds good, and trust me, the 90s were a weird time, and this is what a lot of developers thought we wanted. Now, Time Commando is definitely an experience, and if you're into retro games and you want to play something you probably never heard of before, you could do worse than Time Commando, but not by much. But this is just such a time capsule into what the 90s used to be like. All of the designs, the aesthetics, the color, the FMV. I do like that little bit of focus pull they did right there, was a good look for sure. But this is something that we'll probably start working on a future Saturn core, and I will definitely show you some gameplay of it because it is one of the most absurd games on the Sega Saturn in both a good and a bad way. Now moving on to another viewer request, Terra Fantasia. This is one that I'm not really familiar with. I know it existed, but I've never actually checked it out myself. But what I come to find is it's actually a really interesting looking game. It's just one of those things. I have not played every single game ever made, popular contrary opinion. I do have some gaps in my knowledge. But seeing this running does have me intrigued as to what is going on. Now granted, this capture is in Japanese, and I don't believe there is a translation, but leave me a comment down below and tell me if you know of one. But it's got an awesome opening. All of the FMV cutscenes are working perfectly fine. And when we get into gameplay, there's a little bit of scratchy audio, but otherwise visually this looks perfect on the Saturn core, and it has an absolutely gorgeous 2D art aesthetic. But leave me a comment down below and tell me if you ever played this before, and if so, if you enjoy it, because it's one of those games, more than one person asked me to check it out, and I figured if more than one person's asking, it must be good. And the battle mechanic system is absolutely interesting. I do love when you have these big group battles. Almost feels like a Disgaea game, except with that medieval flair. All of the sprite zooming and scaling, all of the camera movements are just working perfectly fine on the current build of MiSter. This is another Andy D capture, so if we're not playing the game correctly, you can go and blame him. All jokes aside though, this just looks incredible and I do want to continue checking it out. I love this medieval art style and everything that's working on MiSter here, and I also love the board game aesthetic to it as well, kind of why I compare it to a Disgaea entry. And I'm not sure how many people on my channel play Disgaea. I haven't for some years, but tell me down below if you've ever played that franchise, because I feel like I never really hear it mentioned from any of my viewers whatsoever. But Terra Fantasia, at least up until this point, working 100%. You can go check it out today if you so want, and let me know how it goes for you. And now back to one more viewer request. Basically everybody's viewer request is Panzer Dragoon Saga, and that is because it's one of the most well-known RPGs on the Sega Saturn. And if you want an English language copy of your collection, bring your mortgage payment because it's going to cost that much. Now Andy has gotten this running on his system, but he loads games not off the micro SD card, but off of a hard drive. I can get almost to this point. I get to the character naming screen and then it freezes upon load. But you can see here that it is working on some MiSter hardware, but it is going to freeze in a moment. But it's going to be incredible when this finally does work on MiSter, because while there is other ways to play this game, playing it on original hardware is the way to go. But if you don't have an optical disc emulator in your Saturn, or if you don't own a very, very, very expensive copy of the game, you basically have to use software emulation, which can be hit or miss, and it can freeze sometimes. But obviously I can't knock software emulation for freezing, because the core is going to do the same thing here. But this game is incredible. It is a 10 out of 10 in my book. They did an incredible job of taking the on-rail shooter, which was Panzer Dragoon, and pivoting it to a full RPG while still keeping a lot of that flying mechanic going around. But you can see here the entire menu system is working. There are no glitches graphically, at least in the areas that we can access. It is just working, but it does seem to have loading issues between areas. That's why mine always freezes at the character naming screen when it tries to load. And you're going to see here there is an elevator that we need to activate, and that's how you get into the open world overworld above. But the minute we walk on to that elevator, it's going to try to load in a different asset right here, and you're going to see that it is going to freeze basically right now. That's it, it goes to a black screen and the cutscene just stops. But that is the current status of the Sega Saturn core. Srg320 gave us an awesome update yesterday, and considering the situation, you know how important that is, not just on the Sega Saturn side. But I'm going to be testing more games in a couple of weeks on the newest core, so if you have any requests, whether games weren't working before, if you want to see there's improvements, leave me a comment down below and I will definitely check them out. But the Sega Saturn core keeps evolving, and as of May 10th, we have a new core to play with, and that's going to be spectacular, and I can't wait to see what loads next. Short of that, that's your video. Go try the new core. Bye-bye.